Hey, what's up, Shining Otaku? Today we have a comic creative who has created a bit of buzz with his work. He started out as an inker at DC Comics. He hails from Spain and later moved to Japan, living the dream of many, working the series Matagi Gunner at Kodansha's morning magazine. Today we welcome the outstanding manga artist, Juan Albarran. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Okay, everyone. So obviously this is a special episode. This is an opportunity. It's not often that we get to interview creators straight from Japan, but today we've been able to interview Juan, live here. First off, I want to say, you're living the dream of many, and I know you've done a few interviews out there where, people have been able to, hear a little bit of your perspective, but just really quick, just for those of people who may not be familiar out there, would you mind just telling people a little bit about how you got involved in doing this?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I started working in comics around 2013, lately in my mid-30s. And Japan was not in my cards at all. It's something that I never ever dreamed of because of the language barrier. I thought that it would be impossible. So I just started to work in American comics. I started as an inker, which I thought would be just a temporary thing, on my way to becoming a penciler or just a full artist. But no, it actually ended up being a job of 7 years. It actually became my full-time job. Really enjoyed it. And then COVID came in 2020, everything stopped. And I stopped getting work from DC. And I had to make a decision, do I wait or do I try to do something else? And actually, it was a bit of a desperate situation for me because, of course, in the middle of, COVID, which seems like the end of the world. Suddenly, I don't have a job. It's what am I going to do now? The bills don't stop coming, right? So I decide to turn to Japan. Again, I'm more of a manga fan than I'm an American or European comics fan, all my life. But as far as work, again, I thought that Japan was impossible. But, big problems, big solutions, desperate times call for some creativity. So I decided to try Japan as an assistant. I thought that working for, as a mangaka for one of those magazines would be impossible. Also, I didn't have the experience to, I didn't think I had the pace, the speed to be able to fulfill a weekly series in Japan. So I decided to go as an assistant first. That lasted for 2 years. And during the second year, I realized that the language barrier actually wasn't as bad with online translation and things like that. So I just decided to, while I'm working as an assistant, learning how the making manga from in Japan works, the system works with other actual mangaka that work for Kodansha and Shogakukan and Kadokawa and other publishers. In my free time, I started drawing my one-shots, writing and drawing my own one-shots. So I did that, and I started sending my work to publishers through website. Whenever I found a magazine that accepted the work through their websites, I didn't do anything weird or special. Just go to their websites and just send the work via PDF or PNG files or whatever. And a lot of people got back to me. It was a little bit surprising because I thought that they would completely ignore me. Hey, somebody from Spain. I was living in Spain at the time, Barcelona. So, and I didn't speak Japanese at all. So I still don't speak almost no Japanese, by the way. And so, I started getting feedback from people and started to make relationships with some editors in many magazines. Japanese people are really polite. So they all reply. So either sometimes it was this is not what we publish. We are a shoujo manga. Why are you sending this story, dark story about suicide to us? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, everybody would reply, and everybody would just be nice about it. And eventually, after a whole year, I got the opportunity of drawing my own series basically because one of the mangaka I was working for as an assistant, basically he actually recommended me. And
that sounds huge.
His
that
editor,
like that happens
who's
often.
now my editor. Well, actually, the system of assistants that graduate, they call it graduation here, into mangaka, actually, it's pretty common. Like Oda was assistant of the Rurouni Kenshin guy. And,
yes, yeah.
And Naruto guy. It's just, I'm horrible with names. He was Oda's assistant, I think, if I don't remember incorrectly. So that's actually a system that works. Like people get into the manga business as an assistant, they learn how it works from inside, and then if the assistant's done a good job and works hard, whatever, the mangaka actually helps the assistant to become professional. That's what happened to me.
It actually makes more sense than when people say they call it like usually the mangaka, if I'm not mistaken, like sensei. I think that makes a lot more sense now, like teacher.
Yes, right, exactly. So the mangaka that helped me was Masamichi Sato. His manga is published in English, Quality Assurance in Another World. This is the Japanese edition of that manga. And so his editors asked him, like, do you know, we're getting ready to publish, to start the production in a manga called Matagi. Do you know anybody that, any artist, any new face that we can go and try to work with him? And he said, okay, like there's this guy, like you're going to think I'm crazy, but there's this guy that's my assistant. He's in Spain. He doesn't speak Japanese, but he told me, I had this conversation with him. He told me that he wants to become mangaka. So are you interested? And then the planets aligned, because for this Matagi manga, there's two editors. One of them lived in Spain for a year, and she speaks Spanish quite well. So everybody was like, hey, what is happening here? Like everything aligns. So they actually reached out to me, sent me a message saying, hey, we're looking for a mangaka here, and are you interested? And I'm like, of course I'm interested. So that's how the whole thing started. Like basically through a mangaka that I was working for, I got the introduction or the recommendation, I guess.
Wow. Okay. So like, I guess when, with that kind of prompts me, think going back to you starting off as an assistant, because we talked to Jamie Lynn Lano. She was an assistant for the creator of the new Prince of Tennis, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the new Prince of Tennis or if you've heard of her at all, but I remember her talking about the process of, being an assistant and, all that goes into it. So when you had to make that transition from doing like inking for like DC versus doing, being like an assistant for a mangaka in Japan, what was the difference in the process, and how did that, was it difficult to be able to adapt to that before you even moved on to doing like Matagi Gunner?
Right. Well, first of all, I do know about her, Jamie, because I know she wrote like an ebook a few years ago, explaining her experiences as an assistant, and that was like when I was dreaming about becoming working in Japan, and I bought the book and I read the book.
Oh wow!
And it just fascinated by her stories. But again, I think she speaks Japanese, right? So, so her experience, it was like, okay, this doesn't apply to me, because she is just like another Japanese person living in Japan who speaks Japanese. It can apply for a job there. For me, it was like, I live in Spain, I don't speak Japanese. It's basically impossible for me, right? So I know about her experience. Just seemed fascinating to me, at the time. And now just at the time I started working as an assistant myself, I was like, oh, great, this is happening to me now. And now I'm mangaka for the last 3 years, which is still blowing my mind every day. But anyway, the transition from DC to manga was difficult in some ways and easy in some others. Like as far as style of, backgrounds and everything that I was doing, it was not new to me, because I've read so much manga throughout my life that I kind of knew exactly what they wanted. Like they say, okay, draw a school, draw a castle in the back. I know. Just I've read so much manga that it's stylistically, I know what they're looking for, like thin lines and a lot of detail and realistic, usually photorealistic backgrounds, things like that. Also, I had a lot of manga in my house, so all I had to do is like, okay, do I need references? I just go to any manga that I think applies, and it was easy to make the transition. It was difficult because of the pace, and also because I was drawing. Like when you're inking, they give you a fairly good, everything is fairly just finished almost. Like when you get the pencils, like all the difficult decisions are already made. Like perspective is there when it comes to backgrounds. I mean, perspectives are already set up. Everything is, all the information is there. You just have to make it pretty. When you're an assistant, sometimes they don't give you anything. They just a rough perspective, and they tell you, okay, you have to draw a school classroom or whatever, a house, a neighborhood, a forest, whatever. So then you have to draw. It's not just make things pretty like an inker, like improve and polish and everything. It's just you have to create from zero. So of course I had drawn before, it's not like it was my first time drawing things, but I had been an inker for 7 years, and suddenly I'm like, okay, I now have to draw. So you realize of your shortcomings once you start. Yes, you start like, okay, I don't know how to draw trees. And I didn't know this, but now I realize it now that I have to draw so many trees, right? Like that, I was working in a fantasy for this guy, for the Quality Assurance in Another World. It's a fantasy kind of environment. So a lot of trees, a lot of nature. And I was like, oh, I've never drawn this before. Like I know how to draw buildings in perspective, but nature is a whole different thing, right? So I realized of all the things that I needed to be better at and to learn, and that was mentally a bit of a difficult process. The other thing that was difficult is the pace, the deadlines that they work all the time. When I mean all the time is all the time, like 7 days a week for months. Like I remember the first mangaka I started working for, she had like 4 or 5 projects at the same time. They were not like magazine, like actual fiction, the manga that we know and read, and it's translated to America or Spain or whatever. It was more like commercial projects, like companies would hire her to do like, manga about their business or whatever. And people can make a living that way here in Japan because there's a lot of manga is used for everything. So she needed a lot of help with backgrounds, with colors, writing, drawing people in the background. Like there's a concert, so the audience assistant, you go do it, right? So that's what I did for a long time. And the fact that you do like, I don't know, in America, 20 pages inked in 6 weeks, something like that, which is a really slow pace, like a lot of days where you don't have work, or you can take it easy and just be, just take care of the page, just, work on it without rushing it. And suddenly you have to rush everything. Not rush everything. You just have to realize that you have to go fast. Also, really important, assistants get paid by the hour, which is a crazy thing to get used to because, again, you cannot go, okay, I'm going to take my time here, because either you become too expensive for the mangaka to hire you, or you can say, okay, I've taken 5 hours in this one panel, whatever, and I know this is too much, so I'll tell her 2 hours. Right? So I get paid for 2 hours, but then I don't make money. I don't get paid for my time properly. So it's just, you have to ride a fine line between quality and speed. And I was not used to that. So it's all a different mindset. In the end, drawing is drawing, but sadly you have to go fast, but you cannot do a bad job because there's so many assistants that they can choose from. Especially me, I had like a not a complex, but I was always thinking like, okay, I'm a foreigner. I don't speak Japanese. I'm giving this person extra work because of translation. And like the payment also was difficult. Like
twice as hard, basically,
set up,
do half as much, basically.
Right. Yeah. And if I go and say, okay, so if I don't do a good job, she's going to go, okay, I'm tired of this foreigner here. I'm just going to go with another Japanese assistant that's not going to give me so much extra work, right? That never happened though. So in the end, everybody that worked with me, I never missed a deadline. I was always trying to do my best, and I basically gave up on normal life, and I just did assistant work like 24/7, 7 days a week. And I think mangaka appreciated that.
Okay. Michael, did you have anything to say about that?
It's what I was going to say was that it's a very unique challenge, especially as you find yourself, one, with the language barrier, and two, with the with the new adjustment to going into that space, the culture, the shift in work, and you find yourself always having to, basically adjust and understand this new realm that you're in. So my question was, which was really something that stood out and just percolated my interest, was the cultural aspect behind the businesses that wanted the manga that actually made that were made by mangaka and their assistants. From a cultural perspective and a cultural lens, is it like that in other places that you've experienced? Whether it's with American-made comics and having worked with DC in the past, or even in Barcelona, where you've come from. Have you ever experienced that specifically, where businesses reach out to you because they want this special project in comics done? Or has this just been solely from Japan that you've seen that?
When I was in Spain working for DC Comics, I actually had a couple of businesses to approach me like, hey, one was a newspaper, the other one was a normal company. We need a short project here, there for, a short comic, one page to do like a, whatever. The difference, so it does exist a little bit, but the difference was the respect they show to the work they're offering. First of all, the money, completely underpaid. And I mean, I actually didn't take any of the 2 jobs that I was offered in Spain because of the money, basically, and because they treated it as something unimportant, basically. It's like, oh, you just want this, just do whatever, everything will be fine. However, in Japan, manga is like one of the most respected art forms, I think. And the mangaka is treated like a basically celebrity. Like yesterday, I went to a restaurant here, and because I live in a city where there's not a lot of foreigners in the south of Japan, people always look at me, and people are really curious about me. Somebody asked me, so what do you do here? It's like, I'm mangaka. They were like, eh? Cool. Like, I've been asked by people to take pictures with them, even though they don't even know the manga I'm doing. Like, are you mangaka? Then just, it's just a really cool job.
They don't even care what
take
manga.
A picture with me. It's like, well, you don't know me. It's like, oh no, take a picture. Yeah, exactly. So that attitude actually extends to everything in like business wise too in Japan, right? Like when people approach you to do a manga, they realize they're asking for something important, respected. They treat it as something that needs to be paid well, and it'll be an important part of whatever the project they're going to do. But Michael, I ask you the question back. Like, you're in America, so how many manga or comics outside of Biz, Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, whatever? How many do you see in commercial things? Like, the only thing I remember recently is MLB doing an animation, like commercials, whatever, because of Shohei Ohtani is really famous both in Japan and America, so they're using that cultural bridge, so to speak, and they're using some anime. It's not even manga; it's anime. But do you know anything? Like, do you go to the newspapers, or do you see any company advertising their products with manga, with comics? Like, I don't see it, right? So that's how much I think, that's how big the difference is. Like in Japan, you come to Japan, manga is everywhere. Like you go to supermarkets, manga everywhere. Companies, they use manga for everything. So, and you go to America, and I live in America for a few years, by the way. And so I know that there was no comics outside of the comic world. And in Spain, I can tell you there's even less, because we don't even have a business. Like in America, you do have a business with Marvel, DC, and superhero comics, right? So yeah, it's like, I mean, you can see from, not from the artist point of view, but from the customer point of view, how much comics is used to promote anything. Basically, nothing, nowhere. So
It's interesting because, like, when you're saying it, I'm just like thinking about it. I'm like, you would think, and I know I've heard of people say this, but you would think with like some of the Marvel movies and the DC movies that those studios would have made a push to try to bring back the American comic market, to a bigger level. But it doesn't really happen around here. It's like there's no real respect for comics. People know about them. They're fine from pulling from them or, reading them on occasion or even reading them online. Like, people read, manga here online or whatever. They might pick up some in the store, but it's almost like the respect factor is not there. Like, I think the comics culture between Japan and like other parts of the world versus the US is just completely different. Like the US, like, America just doesn't have that respect that it should, I think, have for comics and what people put in, which is maybe, but on the flip side, like, which is something else I guess I want to ask you, like, I know probably the practices with in terms of like of how people may work on comics is a little bit different. Like you kind of talked about that a little bit, like in terms of how much time people maybe have to get a comic done in America is different than how much time someone might have to do a manga chapter in Japan. So, has Kuroshi ever been a concern for you when you're working on I know Kuroshi's supposed to be like, overwork, in Japan. Like if you overwork and, there's like a threat of getting sick or illness, is that something where you've ever worked on, like you're on Matagi Gunner and you're like, or even when you're an assistant and just being like, man, I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm going to have to take some time off.
Overwork is or burnout is basically my new normal. Just you get burnout at some point and you're like, I can't take this anymore. But then things continue the same way. And at some point you're like, oh, I can actually survive this too. So it is what it is. I think if you get into the rhythm of, if you want to get into a rhythm of working for a weekly magazine, Morning is a weekly magazine. You have to get used to, or you have to accept that manga is going to take over your life, basically. I have been overworked, yes. Now I'm a lot better because Matagi Gunner ended 2 months ago. We reached 11 tankobons, 3 years of work, and it finished. And then now I'm working on something else, but I don't have, I think, arigato gozaimasu. And now I don't have like tight deadlines. So yeah, I'm enjoying life a little bit more, but it will come at some point with my next manga. It will, the deadlines and the overwork will come, and I know it's coming. So, but I'm better prepared now because I know what's coming, right? So the trick is, one, accept it is what it is. If I don't want to accept this, then I have to go and work for another market, go back to America or work for French comics. And if I do stay here, which I will, then it is what it is. And I have my way, I have to find a way to make it work, working, I don't know, like what I used to do, 20 pages every week, right? We do have assistants. We do have the support of editors. The editors in the magazine, they do understand what we're doing. That's a big help. Like, also, we can ask for time off sometimes, like not too much, of course, because otherwise we wouldn't make money. But at some point during Matagi Gunner, I would go like, hey, for instance, I'm moving to Japan. It's a difficult thing to do. So can you give me at least a week, off? Like, yeah, sure. They give it. Or I'm getting married. Can I get a week off for the honeymoon? Yeah, sure. So they are reasonable people. But the people here like to read manga so much that's what creates the fact that we work so much to release chapters like almost on a weekly basis because people read it.
I'm actually surprised about like the time off thing a little bit, because I'm like, I was listening to actually a little bit over a week ago an interview that Felipe Smith did with cartoonist Kayfabe. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Felipe Smith, but he was considered to be like at least the first, I think,
Oh
American.
yeah, of course.
You know, yeah. So I one of the things that he kind of talked about is like, just how he was afraid to ever like take time off. I know that was a while back when he was doing People Chew. But I'm like, kind of makes me wonder if the work environment in terms of like, from mangaka has evolved a little bit, if you can actually get a little time off versus in the past where pretty much, it would scare the living daylights out of anybody because they'd be afraid if they're going to cut them loose right after
that. Well, don't get me wrong. Whenever I ask for time off, I was afraid to ask for time off. I shared the feeling of whatever Philip Smith was saying at the time. I think there's two things. One is the self-imposed pressure that we put ourselves in. Like, I've talked to other mangaka, and Japanese are a lot like this. And these Japanese mangaka will tell me, like, no. The readers are waiting for my manga, so I cannot just take off. And that's a very, very Japanese way of doing things. They owe themselves to the customer, the reader, whatever. But I know also that the times have changed. Like, mangakas are dying left and right. Like, how many people like Kentaro Miura, Toriyama, I don't know, so many people that died before, like the normal time of somebody dying at 80 years old or whatever. And it's all because of the abuses of the mangaka life, does, how affects their body. And I think they're realizing that they cannot, abuse the mangaka that way. Or also, I think the mangaka are not revolting, but they're more like, okay, I'm doing your manga, you're making so much money out of it, so if I want to take a day off, I will. Like, I know there's not a rule or how do I say it? It's just like, for instance, in morning, there's mangaka like Space Brothers, who's basically actually ending in the next tankobon after 18 years or something like that.
Oh, wow.
In the last few years, Koyama Sensei, who does Space Brothers, his pace of work slowed down. And that's basically because he's making so much money for the magazine and Kodansha. And I assume that he said at some point, okay, I want to end the series and I want to do it well, and I want to die in the process. So instead of 4 chapters every month, how about 3 every month, or 4 or 2 every month, right? And what is the magazine going to do? He cannot fire somebody in the middle of a series that sells millions to them. Like, the mangaka do have some power. Like Oda recently, Eiichiro Oda from One Piece. I know that he's been sick,
sure,
and he basically imposed that pace of weekly morning Shonen Jump, every week. But recently he's been like, okay, my eyes are going bad, so I'm going to have surgery. Also, I think he's taken a lot of time off because of the Netflix show. Like, I know that there's reports that he said that he went to the set and things like that. So obviously he has to take some time off from manga, right? I think mangaka realizing a little bit that they do have a little bit of power when it comes to that, And from my experience, and I don't know if I arrived at when the culture is already changed a little bit, but my editors always just, if you need some time off, ask. But then I think in 3 years, I asked for time off like 2-3 times. One wedding, another one moving to Japan. And then 1 year is like, okay, one week, give me 1 week last year, because I just cannot take it anymore. They were like, okay. Because I think they prefer you to take a little bit of time off and come back refreshed than just, burn out completely. And then you cannot draw, you cannot function, you disappear. Like, people do that, right? Like, okay, I cannot draw, I miss my deadline. Like, they prefer for people to take a little bit of time off, I think, at least in the morning, before it gets too bad. And at least that's what they told me. It's like, don't let it get too bad. Like, if you really burn out and you need a week, let's talk about it, right? Like, we will adjust your schedule. That doesn't mean that next chapter is not going to come out, like, but maybe in a month from now, where our schedule doesn't get so messed up, then we can do it that way. So I know that I talked to a mangaka from Morning that worked for 22 years for Morning. a manga called Kawachitare. This guy is called Takahiro Kochi. A manga that will never get released in the West because it's about lawyers and things like that. Nothing, fancy or exciting.
That stuff I like, though.
But
that's the
really,
good stuff.
I know. That's my favorite kind of manga too. But hey, that's what people buy. But so he was working in morning in doing 80 pages a week, like 20. I did 60. I'm sorry, 80 pages a month. I did 60 a month. Working every month, every week for years, right? And he had this series for 22 years. And then in the middle of these 22 years, another Kodansha magazine called Evening, it's a monthly, bi-monthly magazine that every 2 weeks, one chapter, approached him to do another series. So he ended up with 120 pages a month, 6 deadlines every month to release. And I'm like, why didn't you say no? Like, are you insane? Like, you were doing double the work that I did, and I sometimes struggle to get it done. Howard is like, oh no, I didn't feel I could say no. So that's a mentality that comes from a way of thinking that I do not understand. I don't understand how people are like, oh, I don't feel I can say no. Like, yes, you can. You're free. But Japanese culture and society, that's the way it works, right? And I asked him, did you ever miss the deadline? And he said, once. I said, what happened? It's like, oh, I passed out because of overwork. They had to take me to a hospital because I just passed out. So, but that was back in the 90s, 2000, early 2000s. And I think because of cases like him, where people get so overworked and have to stop working because they have to go to the hospital, the culture has changed a little bit, and now it's a little bit better. Like, I know in morning, truly weekly series, I don't think there's one. Maybe Cooking Papa, which is a really, really, like, it's been 40 years publishing. I think he's like 75 years old. He's still making like a weekly manga about cooking, but I think besides that, everything is mostly like 3 weeks a month or 2 weeks a month, or like Space Brothers. I think he publishes whenever the chapter is ready and he goes, right? In my case, it was three weeks a month, 3 weeks in a row, 1 week no publishing, and then start all over again.
Okay, now we're at the halfway point of the stream. Everybody's watching. This is the halfway point of the interview. Really quick, before we get into this last half, of course, I have to go ahead and give a little bit of a quick promo to the Honeycomb Hideout. For those of you guys who, basically a podcast about nerd talk, anything doing with industry talk. It's basically Howard Stern for geeks. There'll be a link down below to be able to check out the Honeycomb Hideout. It is the official Imaginos Workshop podcast. Definitely, if you want to get any updates, not just about, the industry, but even pertaining to us or anything like that, you want to check this podcast out, there will be a link down below to it. All right. Now let's jump back in. I'll kick it off to you, Michael. You can start this off.
A little bit of a change of pace from the questions. I know we've been focusing more so on culture and not process. My question is about process, but we've been focused on culture, and it's really interesting to hear the perspective of someone that's in Japan doing it. And of course, that's been said multiple times. You're living the dream, but the minutia of the dream is what I kind of want to get at right now. So what does your process look like from an artist perspective? What does your process look like from concept to finished page? What do you do? Do you take a break in between? I just want to get some detail on how you usually approach things.
Okay, there's no breaks. That's the first thing. The system morning sets up, it's just set up so you get no breaks. They're really smart about it. Let me tell you about it. Okay, so I work with a writer, like somebody that does the story. The story is not done, at least in my case, and I know in most cases here in Japan, it is not done like in American comics where somebody types out the panel 1, write a castle. It's nighttime. Like, no, they do it in storyboard form. Like, it's very, very basic. Of course, depends on the skills of, drawing skills of the writer. In my case, I had a writer that actually published another manga before with Morning, so he can draw pretty well. So he would do like a basic sketch of the the page, the angles. Like, he made most of the decisions really of the page actually. I could make my own adjustments. I could make changes. I can whatever I can improve on from what he sent. I have free reign to do whatever I want it. So I can always just make a change. Or if it's really big, I'll talk to the editors like, hey, how about this? Do you think that? And always, actually, every change that I made, they, in 3 years, now that I think about it, they never said no. They actually, if I was always trying to make it for the better. So the process starts like this. I get a PDF with the basic storyboard. And then that's what they call the Nemu. And the text was, of course, in Japanese, because the writer is in Japanese, and I cannot read Japanese very well, almost nothing really. So what I did is ask them, can you send me the text of the word balloons in a Word file so I can translate it, and at least I know what's happening in the manga. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult. So they send me that. I did the translation, I read it, and from there I draw my own Nemu, or my what we would call in American comics the pencils, which is the basic drawings or sketches, or just not like the writer would just draw like the basic, but not really like, how do I say this? I could change things, and whenever I do the Nemu, it's actually what I will be inking on, like just the definite look of every panel, of everything, right? And also a basic backgrounds of everything, because not only the editor has to understand what I want to draw in there, but also for my assistants. I have to communicate the assistants what I want them to draw, and a basic drawing sketch of the actual background that I want is the best way to do it. So if you looked at my Nemus or my storyboards that I send the editors, they actually are much more details than the basic storyboards of any other mangaka that's the writer and mangaka, one person himself, like, I don't know, like Eiichiro Oda, right? So he knows what he has to write, so he wants to draw at the end, so he doesn't have to, communicate any details to anybody. Just, it's all for himself. In my case, the editors were really concerned that I actually understood what it was, like what was happening in the manga. One of the characters, one side of the manga is set in rural Japan, so there were a lot of Japanese traditions and Japanese food and things like that. So they were really concerned that I was actually understanding everything, and that I would portray it in a way that the Japanese reader would go like, oh, this is not, this is okay, not fake. This is drawn by a foreigner, and it doesn't look how it actually is, right? Yeah. So also like body language, like gestures, or like Japanese say no like this, or when they say me, we point at our chest, but they point themselves at the nose, things like that, right? Like things that if I go like, oh, are you talking about me? Like this, a Japanese guy would never do that. They would go, are you talking about me? Right? So they wanted to be careful with all those details. So when the reader reads, the final manga, that it actually looks, real, believable. So I had to draw a lot of detail, and that was my most difficult part, because instead of drawing like a really quick sketch and just a little bit of the expression in the faces and all that, I actually had to draw a quite almost finished, drawing of whatever was going on. So I sent it to the editors.
That's a good question, actually. So like, I know in, at least in in Western environments, typically if I ask someone like, how long does it take to do like a finished page, usually what I hear is about 8 hours, and I think that's what, would you agree with that, Michael? That's usually what people usually say, about 8 hours, a day is what, well, that's what I've heard, at least on my end a lot, that's what Marcus told us. But like, pretty much I'm wondering, like, with the process that I'm hearing and how it goes in Japan, I'm wondering, does it, like, how long did it take for you to do like a page like this? Like, did your assistants do something like this, or how long would something like that take?
In this case, in this page, well, this is a page from chapter 1, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, I drew perspective for all the houses. I drew a basic sketch of the deer on the left side, and then a basic sketch of the, like, this was a really, really easy page for me, because in the end, I actually, the inking, I just inked the little guy at the bottom, and the deer. I actually inked the deer, but everything else was done inked by the assistants. But the inking was basically a polishing of whatever I drew. So every perspective of every house, and where the mountains were and where the trees were and everything, I drew in the sketch, right? So a Nemu of 20 pages would take me usually 3 days. If I had to do like a really quick sketch, just to, like, if I was the mangaka myself, like the actual writer and mangaka, I did everything, then 8 hours sounds okay. Like 20 pages, maybe a day and a half, depending on how much detail you want to put in, right? So that would take me 3 days. And then I would send it to the editors, and editors would ask me for changes all the time. Like, the manga lasted 100 chapters. In all 100 chapters, they requested changes. At the Nemu stage,
so something like this might take longer, like this particular page?
To do the Nemu, no. It's basically the same thing, because yes, at this stage it's the same. I can tell you, as a rule of thumb, action takes longer for me to draw than people talking, right? And especially in the inking stage, like all the speed lines and focus lines, things like that, I did it because I'm a maniac about that. I don't know why. I don't want assistants to do it. But mostly that's usually a work of the assistants, right? In my case, I ended up inking all the characters and all the special effects, like speed lines and things like that. But in that case, in that page that you just showed, we're talking about the Nemu, I had to draw a little bit of a sketch of a truck here, and the shot comes from here, and the glass breaks. Like, it has to be all understood, and then, of course, I do a very crude sketch of the excavator at the bottom there, or whatever, and then the assistant will draw the actual thing, like, right. So I wouldn't have to draw, like, every single detail or anything, just a really quick sketch so the editor knows what's happening here. And then after 3 rounds of revisions on the Nemu, I will work on the inking at the same time of the assistants. But why did I say before that the system is set up so I don't have breaks? It's because at the beginning I did the Nemu of chapter 1 and the Nemu of chapter 2 in a row, right? So I did 1, I didn't rest, I did 2. And when I send number 2 to the editors, number 1 had been approved. So while I wait for feedback of number 2, I'm starting to work on the inks of number 1. So I'm working on the inks of number 1. That takes around 3 days for me, 3-4 days sometimes. While the assistants work on the backgrounds, they usually take a week to do that. And when I finish the inks of the chapter 1, I start with the Nemu of chapter 3, which means that in the meantime, chapter 2 Nemu has been approved. So when I finish chapter 3 Nemu, chapter 2 is ready for the inks. So I'm always working in 2 chapters at the same time. Whenever I finish inks of 1, I start the Nemu of the next. Whenever I finish this Nemu, inks of the previous. So it's that system. So it's set up so we don't get any breaks. And on top of that,
your mind basically has to be focused on more than one thing. It's like you have to juggle a little bit.
And that to me is really difficult. Like, I never enjoy that. I was used for 7 years to work in one chapter, 1 page at a time, one page, then 1 chapter, and then we start the next chapter when I was in DC, right? but not only that, like also every 9 chapters in our case, we have to do a tankobon. So let's do the covers. And the manga doesn't stop just so you draw the covers. So you're doing the weekly 3 chapters every week, as 3 chapters every month, weekly, and then they go, okay, so now you have to do the covers. So you have to fit that work in there somehow. So going back to Michael's question about the process, I do in parallel while I'm working on the inking of the characters and the special effects. The assistants, I have 3 assistants, and I have that many only because, not because I do more work or less work, but 2 reasons. One, I don't want any of those 3 assistants to get sick. Like if I had one and the assistant gets sick, then I'm in big trouble. So in my case that I have 3, if one of them gets, sick or whatever, then I have other 2 that can get the work done. And also, I only have like 5, 6 days, 7 days sometimes for them to do the work. So, if one person had to draw 20 pages of backgrounds, probably a week is maybe not enough. So I had to distribute the work either way. So I do that. We spend working on the manuscript. Like I do, again, 3 days usually, the inks. And when I do that, I start working on the name of the next one, the next chapter. And the assistants take an extra 3 days to finish the backgrounds. When they do, then I just do a PDF and send it to the editors, and the editors do another 1 or 2 rounds of changes. Hopefully not a lot, but many times a lot of them. So, and when that happens, then a chapter gets approved, and I just send them the final TIFF files and like high resolution and all that, and I send them those files, and they add the text. Like the text is not added in my files. So they take that, and really quickly, in a day or 2, they have to just add the text and make corrections. They put like the logos, some text in the sides. That's very typical of Japanese manga. And when the chapter is finished for production, ready to go to the magazine, they send it to me again. And because we approved everything, which is something I was not expecting, a lot of the work that I have to do is approving everything. Like, okay, this is finished. So they send it to the mangaka to approve. Is this okay for you? Can you, and I can ask changes if I want to on whatever, design, logo, anything.
Here's a question about this. This is something I've been kind of wondering. So, you said that you don't speak Japanese. So when the project is finished, are you able to, eventually, like, did somebody translate it for you so you can also read the story yourself if you wanted to? Or you're like, you know what, I want to read through Matagi Gunner, because I did draw it. Like, are you able? Has anybody ever translated it for you to be able to read it yourself?
Well, that happened at the beginning. At the beginning, when they send me the nemu, they send me, remember, the text on a separate file. So when I translate that file with automatic online translation, like that anybody can, there's a website called deepl.com that you can put it there, and it translates, and it does a decent job. That's my translation of the manga. Then I got lucky because Matagi Gunner got licensed in Spain. Oh. So they send me the translated version of it. So eventually I actually read it in my language, right? But otherwise, when the manga gets published here in Japan, in the magazine or in tankobon format, I know what happens because I did the translation of the original text they sent me at the beginning of the process, but not because nobody translated the text at the end. Like I'm supposed to already know what happened. So I know what happens, but in Japanese, basically, I just, look through it, but I cannot read the text. So.
It's interesting because when you're telling me or telling us about the process on how everything works with, how pretty much, they, gave you the storyboards and you kind of work off of the storyboards and you draw it, it really just goes to show, like our teacher, Mark Dudley, he always talks about how comics is a marriage between like art and, writing. And that's like a true definition of it. The fact that you're able to tell the story through art, and because they were clear enough in their storyboarding, you're able to tell what the story is just by doing that, and you're able to tell the story. Any clarification, obviously you have the editor there, that you guys can kind of talk
Right.
through it and work through it. But like, I mean, that to me means that you have to have excellent storytelling, storyboard wise, to even be able to have that dynamic. So just to me, it really shows, a level of mastery right there.
Well, yeah, I mean, Japanese publishers focus mainly on story. Like there's two main focus. One is the main character. Like we spend so much time at the beginning of the production before anything got published. Before even working on chapter 1, I spent 4 months designing the main 2 characters of the story. This guy over here. This guy took me 4 months. 4 months to get to this guy. I had like 70 pages of exactly that guy, Hitonari Yamano. It took me 70 pages of designs of this guy and the girl, which is at the beginning is also this Tankobon too. That's the other main protagonist at the beginning of the story. Then many other characters come in. It took me so long because they know that that's the most important part, right? Like the character is the main focus of manga. Once we got that, then it's story. And story, they know that you can have the best art in the world, but if the story is not compelling, it's not going to work. And I don't want to say that art is not important because it is, but what they look at is it's the whole thing, story and art. It's gelling. Is it gelling? Like, is it working? Like you have like, I don't know, Crayon Shinchan, right? Like the most crude, basic art, or Doraemon, like really basic round.
I think
shapes,
One Punch Man is a good example because if you look at One's own webcomic when he started, it was like it wasn't all that good, like in terms of the art.
Right.
But the story capture, if I'm not mistaken, Yusuke Murata, ended up coming across it. I might be wrong about how they ended up hooking up, but like Yusuke Murata redrew the webcomic in his style, and that's how you have the One Punch Man we know today. And I think, but I mean, obviously One's ability to tell a story is really what got him that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's how it happened. And as far as I understand, that's yeah.
Okay, now
sorry, the connection is not very good, but I get the gist of what you're trying to say. But yeah, I think that's exactly how it happened. And basically the story is, I think the story is basically the most important part. The art is not like it's not important at all, but they look at the character and story first, and then if somehow the manga, you read it and it's like, oh, the drawing is a little crude, but I still enjoy this manga. That's what they are looking for. Like that you enjoy the story, you are hooked to the story, you are hooked to the character, and you want to keep reading, right? If that's the case, then the manga is going to work. Because that was one of my fears. Like, oh, I don't know if my art is good enough. It's like, no, it's actually, the editor said it's working with what we're doing. Like, you don't need to draw like Shinichi Sakamoto or Katsuhiro Otomo. It's just that, of course, they're masters, but you don't need to draw like them to create a good story, right? So yeah, I think story, and that all begins with the storyboard, the memo that they send at the beginning. If that in itself works, it makes for a compelling comic. Then that's it. I mean, half the battles already won, right? Like then my job is just to make it look as cool as possible, or to as funny as possible, or as scary as possible, depending on the manga that I'm writing, right? So what they're actually looking for is, okay, we're doing a funny manga. Is it funny? Does it make me laugh? Yes, then works. Is it a scary manga? Does it get me scared? Yes, then it works. So they're not like, does this person draws anatomy like perfectly, things like that. It's not about that so much. It's just about, does it work as it is or not, right? So and that process begins with the storyboard.
So I know with some of the things that you've mentioned, like even when you're talking about in terms of expressions, a lot of times they want in Japan for you to essentially try to modify the way that you tackle manga to the perspective of what is respectful to Japanese culture. Basically, making sure that it's it's kind of modeling what you typically would see in Japanese culture according to, you know, their perspective. So that brings into question, like, is there a place if someone, let's say you have someone who is from a Western country and they want to tell a Western story in Japan, is there, from your perspective from doing this, is there a place for that in the Japanese market for Western stories?
Yes, big yes, but and I'll tell you why it's a big yes. It's because they asked me that when I was working, when I was sending one shots, when I was working as an assistant, I was sending my one shots. I sent a couple stories that were basically like Japanese set, like it was set in Japan, Japanese culture things, like about baseball in Japan, things like that I enjoy. And they were like, and most everybody at the beginning, I told you that most everybody replied. Half of those replies, they were like, oh, you're from Spain. This is really cool. Why don't you tell me something about Spain? Like, write a manga that only you with your background can write. And that Japanese readers will enjoy, you know, they read your manga, they learn something about your culture, and you can write a manga that no Japanese people here can write or draw because your background is different. So there's a thirst for that, I think, in Japan, because they're always looking for something different. Now, that said, I think the flip side of that is that things have to be presented to the Japanese reader in a way that it's not too jarring for them. Like, for instance, just going to the basics. You cannot come here and expect to do a full manga in color, because there's no time, and because Japanese manga and Japanese readers are used to reading manga in black and white, right? Also, the faces, the art style, the eyes. You know, if you come here, it's like, okay, I'm going to do a manga in the style of Alex Ross or Frank Miller, of, I don't know, whatever big artist in American comics, or I don't know, Tintin or Obelix, just like, you know, French manga, French comics. The Japanese readers are not used to that. So the publisher is going to go, okay, yeah, tell me your story about whatever Western thing you want to, but make it not so strange to the Japanese reader that is not going to sell. You have to make it accessible to the Japanese reader in a way. So, and I actually got that. Like, sometimes they would tell me, can you, the style, can you, doesn't look like something you would see in Japanese manga. Can you adapt, I don't know, the shape of the eyes or the style, or the lines are too thick. I got that comment at the beginning. The outlines are too thick. Can you make it a little bit thinner? Like, that's the style we have here, and the readers are more used to it. So you do get that. So you have to, it's a balance. Like, you cannot come with a completely foreign or strange art style or way of or storytelling or way of, you know, telling your stories that is so strange to Japanese manga that they're going to, manga readers, that they're going to reject it. At the same time, having a fresh perspective that comes from your background or something like that, actually that's going to work, right? So yeah, I think there's a space for that, but you have to also realize where you're going into, and you don't have like completely free reign to do whatever you want to. Also, very important, story. The story structure, they use what they call here a Kishotenketsu, which is a traditional story structure used in Asia, China, here in Japan. Like everything, every anime you see, every manga you read, every anything, content, media that you see in Japan, coming from Japan, probably is going to have that Kishotenketsu structure. Nothing new. Like, I'm not, you know, revealing any secret. Just go online, Kishotenketsu, and it'll explain what it is. And that's a big difference. Like, that's the way Japanese readers are expected, and that's the way Japanese editors are used to work on stories. Like, that's the structure they know. So whenever you come to Japan, it's like, okay, I want Western story. I want to tell a story about America, about Spain, Barcelona, Italy, whatever. They are, okay, tell us. We want to learn about your country. But you're going to be expected to tell it in a story structure in a way that it's, you know, fits with whatever everybody else is doing in Japan, which, by the way, it's a very cool story structure to work on, and it's a lot of fun. personally, I think it's better than the usual three act story or the hero's journey that they have in the West. More freeing, they have more options, and so if you get to know that way of working and how stories are told in Japan, then you can come here and go and tell your story about anything.
Okay, all right. Well, since we're coming close to the end of our time, we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap up. But before we do that, I have, just a couple more questions for you. I got our, one more question. Then I got I like to call it our traditional. Actually, Michael, you can ask the next question. Then we'll ask our traditional question.
So, I'm just gonna be honest. I just enjoy listening to you so much, Juan.
Thank you.
Because it's been informative this whole time. And sometimes there are things that you've said that have been very just reiterating things that we have heard in the past, but it's just so refreshing to hear from someone that's in the industry that has also they have something completed, and it's a marvelous work too as well. And I know I got to pick up a copy, and I think it's
well, hopefully it'll get translated to English sometime. So that hasn't happened, but I'm not losing faith on that.
Well, I mean, like from one of our colleagues, he actually gave us some and I still have yet to like find out. I will reach up here, but I'm afraid that all my books will crash down on me for myself. But we have some one of our colleagues, Jeff Lilly, he gave us some manga from Japan because his wife is Japanese. And I just look at it and I just marvel at it all the time, just from the structure of it. So I would be honored to, even if it's not even translated, I would be honored to just have it, just to look at it and hold it. And I know I can't translate it. Yeah, but it's just
me neither, by the way, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's just been an honor and just a pleasure being able to listen to you. And I'm saying all this because I don't technically have a question at this moment. So
okay, all right. Well, I guess
just say thank you, Michael, for that. I hope that. By the way, now that you say that, you can actually buy manga. I know it's not the same, especially for American readers. They do want to have like the actual book, but you can actually buy my manga or any manga from anywhere, digital, online. So there's various places, but there's a website called bookwalker.com that has two versions. The global version, you can buy a lot of manga translated to English, digital, and you can read it in your iPad anywhere. And then there's the Japanese version that you can find any manga, including mine. And if you or anybody watching this is curious about manga or want to see manga that's never been published in America or translated to English, and they are like, oh, but I want to see this manga or this art style that, if you're a mangaka drawing to, you want to learn from any of the masters or whatever, you have access to that. You don't have to come to Japan. Also, I think if you have a little bit of money, Amazon Japan, you can buy anything from all over the world. They will ship it out to you. Shipping is not cheap, especially these days. But if you and your friends get together, it's like, okay, let's buy quite a few, books of manga and share the shipping costs, and then it becomes affordable. So that's another way that people can buy it. But thank you, Michael. I appreciate that anything that I say it's useful to you or anybody watching, and hopefully, I can help anybody. Just somebody gets inspired by anything that I had to say, or didn't get too scared by you're working all the time, things like that. Then, I'm in Japan, but when I started working in Matagi, I was in Spain. So anybody from anywhere can actually get to work in Japan. It's just, I admit it's more difficult because of the language, but it is possible.
All right. So final two questions. Well, the first one I'm just going to ask is so of course because you've done the inking for DC, and you've obviously had the experience of completing an entire manga series in Japan. You've worked as an assistant. Can you ever see a world, obviously hearing how busy you are, can you ever see a world where maybe you're able to do something like that simultaneously? Could you ever see, if, let's say you were doing it monthly or something like that, where you're able to do a project for DC and do a project, for a major publisher in Japan? Or is that something that you don't see being feasibly possible?
Short answer is no. I would die, I think. But there's a longer answer to that. And if I had time, here's the thing. When I started working in Matagi, I was really slow. I didn't have my process figured out. And I thought, how are people making 2 series or 3 at the time, at the same time? Because there are mangaka doing that. But as time went by, my process got faster. I got used to it. I can see how if I worked in a monthly magazine here in Japan, which there are quite a few, that I would be able to do something else. However, if I was able to do something else, I would probably not do it for American comics. I would do a second work in Japan. Why? Because the treatment of the mangaka in Japan from publishers and from readers is much better. The financial conditions usually are also much better. Like whatever I create in Japan, I'm part owner of whatever I create, right? Like if at some point Matagi gets adapted to anime or a movie, or they make some, I don't know, instant ramen, designs that you go to the supermarket and you see the ramen product with the character or whatever. If that happens, I make money. Like last night, I went to see Fantastic Four new movie here in Japan. So how many mangaka, comic book artists that work in Fantastic Four comics are getting paid from that movie? I don't know. Probably not many. Right, because Marvel is the owner of those characters. Probably nobody, right? Like, I don't know, so I don't want to say nobody, but maybe probably nobody. So in the long run, it's much better for me to invest my time in creating something for the Japanese market, because if something hits bigger, I don't know, becomes like one of those big hits here in Japan, then I'm going to get a lot of more return from my work. So also it's a lot more freeing. Like the fact that I can think about, maybe I want to do a manga about sports, about cooking, about lawyers, about fantasy, about fighting, about an old man playing video games, like Matagi Gunner. Like in America, if you want to make real money, you can hit it big with something like The Walking Dead, which is an indie manga and an indie comic that became a franchise. That's a bit of an exception, but otherwise you just have to go and do superheroes, basically, if you want to make a decent living, right? Here in Japan, you own creator own rights from everything you do. So to me, that's much better system to work in. So that's the long answer.
All right. Well, here's the final question. Traditional question. Kind of, a play off of a movie title. At the end of your career as a manga artist or comic book creator, what is your goal? Basically, what is your end game? How do you see it all going, and how do you want it to be when you reflect back?
To not be unemployed. No, I realize that's not a good answer. But no, my main goal, I keep changing the goalpost on myself a little bit, because when I was an assistant, it's like, oh, I'm an assistant in Japan. Like if I die now, I would be a happy man. But then no, I actually want to draw manga in Japan. And then I got to do that. And it's like, oh, I've done it. Bucket list. Checked out. Like I did it. And actually, no. When I did it, I was like, I want to write my own manga. And that's now my goal, right? So after Matagi Gunner, I'm now working on something else. I cannot say what it is, but it's something, a bit of a special project, like a short thing that Morning asked me to do. And the cool thing is that I'm writing and drawing it myself. So it's not a series per se. Like I know it's really vague when I'm explaining, it doesn't make any sense, but when it comes out, people will know what it is and it will make sense. But it's a short thing that I'm writing and drawing myself. And that's kind of like a preparation or a test for me to see if I can actually write and draw a manga in Japan. And so far, I think it's going well. So my next goal is to write and draw my own full-blown, full series manga in Japan. Editors have told me that in morning that, yeah, so far it's working. So we'll hear what you have to say. If I'm able to give them a good proposal, a good, good story that they think they can, can publish is good enough, then they will do so. But really, my goal, like I know a lot of people are like, what's your goal? Do you want an anime from your manga? Or like, no, my goal is within manga, within comics. If something else happens with it, with what I create, and becomes something else, a movie, something like that, that's great because I will get a lot of money from it. But my sole focus is on manga. Like my goal basically would be to create one of those manga that I can spend the rest of my life drawing. Like, I don't know, I talked about before, like it's been drawn for 40 years. That would be like, I don't have 40 years of drawing in my future because of my age now, but if I can create something that I can draw for 20 years until I retire or die or whatever, that would be my goal, to create a universe that people enjoy so much, some characters that people enjoy so much that I'm able to draw in for a long time. So that's basically my long-term or final goal, so to speak.
Okay, well, I appreciate hearing that. Last thing before we head out of here, where can everyone find you? People who want to, whether it's even pick up copies of Matagi Gunner or follow you on social media. I know you also have YouTube channel where, you kind of go through your experiences and everything. So, can you give us all the handles?
X or Twitter, which is probably the place where I'm most active because all Japanese readers are usually on X. It's Juan Albarran 75, if I'm not mistaken. Instagram, Juan Albarran Art. I have a website. I don't update it. I take care of it myself, and I don't update it as often as I should. JuanAlbarranArt.com. But they can see in there, they can see links to the Japanese and Spanish links to Spanish versions of the book. They have links to go to their publishers and everything. Facebook, I'm in there, just look for Juan Albarran and look for this face. This face is everywhere, basically. This guy, that's my avatar. And yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. I'm also on YouTube, not very active at the moment. I would like to be more active, maybe do some kind of podcast like this. But I'm also wary, scared all the time to start something. And then I hit the new series and weekly series, and I just cannot update something for a long time, right? So right now, I'm not very active in social media too much.
I think it's going in and out a little bit.
But yeah, they can find me basically everywhere. Blue Sky also, I'm in there. Like, I'm in basically all the social media. But yeah, just if they want to know about my work and what I've done in the past, X now, and then just scroll through my feed and they can see, my past work and everything that I've been doing.
Okay, well, we're going to make sure, sometime after this goes up, we are going to put those links down below. So make sure you follow Juan on all his social media handles, whatever you prefer. Just make sure you follow him. Amazing artist. He's dropped a lot of science on us today, a lot of, interesting information, and obviously it's been a pleasure to, hear about his experiences. So we really appreciate that. Juan, just, once we close out, if you could just stay on just for a quick moment before, once the stream is done or whatever, I would appreciate it. Sure. That being said, those of you guys who've been following, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you, enjoy content like this. Next week, or actually not next week, 2 weeks from now, we will be interviewing Eden Wells. She is a manga artist from Norway. So make sure you guys check out that interview because it's going to be a really good one, very insightful one. She has a lot of information, a lot of knowledge to drop on us as well. So you want to make sure you check that out. Also, there'll be updates to Origami Super Punch coming out pretty soon. Obviously, this should have already been out, but I believe Indie Planet will have that posted. I'm going to say maybe within the next week. I told you guys that a couple weeks ago, but they had some delays due to San Diego Comic-Con, which is why you haven't been able to get it. They finally gave me disclosure on why that was the case. But you will be able to see Michael and, myself, all of our works in Origami Super Punch. And we're working on the second one as well. So just make sure you guys be out on the lookout for that. With that being said, once again, round of applause. Thank you so much, Juan, for coming on today. And we're going to go ahead and close out. And we will see you guys in 2 weeks. So peace out.